Stay calm. Look out for falling debris. Once the shaking stops, exit the building in a calm and orderly manner and assemble at the muster point where you will receive further instructions. Thank you for your attention.
Good afternoon, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, students. Welcome to our session this afternoon, the third, for those of you who have been around this morning for a very long but very exciting and engaging day. It has been a time. And so today our session began with a micro-mentorship group, a small group of STEM students, lucky students, that engaged with our CAF representatives in very energetic discussion. We moved really smoothly into the launch of the World of Work program. For those of you who were here, you know that that was a very exciting session, very thought-provoking. And we really want to thank the featured speaker, Dr. Camille Alain, for engaging us this afternoon. This evening's session, we are looking forward to an equally engaging session with the CAF Innovation Series. And this series is entitled Accelerating Innovation-Based Economies in the Caribbean. This is really the first in what CAF looks at hosting a series of conversations designed to accelerate innovation-based societies in the Caribbean. So students, you are part of a unique and groundbreaking initiative. This afternoon, we have a very dynamic panel of experts that will engage you in thought-provoking discourse. But to take you through the session, I would really like to introduce at this time the Regional Manager for the Caribbean at CAF, Dr. Stacy Richards-Kennedy, who will take you through today's proceedings. Dr. Kennedy.
Thank you very much, Kathy Ann. So I'm going to start by recognizing some key persons on this beautiful campus, even in their absence. Professor Derek Chady, Deputy Principal of the St. Augustine, UWI St. Augustine campus, and other members of the executive management team, all of the deans, deputy deans, directors, and heads of department, as well as colleagues from CAF Development Bank of Latin America and the Caribbean. I know some of them are here in person and many of them are connected online, and all staff and students of the St. Augustine campus. Good evening. I'd like to begin with a challenge to the students in the room, because this conversation is really about you and for you. Whether you're from UWI or another secondary or tertiary institution, you're the ones who will drive innovation here in the Caribbean. So what comes to mind when you hear the word innovation? Anyone? Please. Change to already existing industries. Is that it? Yes? I captured it well. Another? Creating something new. I love it. Thank you very much for those ideas. So, for many persons, innovation is about new technologies and the latest gadgets. But as you rightly said, it really goes much deeper than this. Innovation is about possibility. It's about seeing what's in front of you, no matter how challenging, and daring to imagine something different, something better, and then taking action. And as young leaders and future decision makers, you must begin about thinking of the innovations that we need in our region, in healthcare, agriculture, environmental protection, in resilient infrastructure, in energy, and in education. From where I sit as the regional manager for the Caribbean at CAF, I've seen firsthand how innovations can improve lives and uplift communities, how it creates opportunities, employment, and thus how it builds resilience at the individual level, the organizational level, the community level, and of course, the regional level. So ladies and gentlemen, in our region, innovation is not a luxury, it is a necessity. And here in the Caribbean, we are no strangers to adversity, whether it's the constant threat of climatic events, the unpredictability of natural disasters, or the hurdles of building more robust and more diversified small island economies. Indeed, our region faces challenges that are quite unique, but also quite urgent. And here's the truth. We also have the power to activate what is in our minds and in our hearts and put these to work to create something better. The solutions are, therefore, within us, and we have a choice to make. We can either wait and react to the crises of tomorrow, or we can create the solutions today. Innovation, after all, is not about waiting for the world to change, but about leading that change. We've already seen how innovation can unlock transformations in our region. I just returned yesterday from the EU Global Gateway Conference on sargassum in Grenada, and there were innovative solutions from right here in our region turning sargassum, a major threat, into opportunities in biofuels, fertilizers, and even construction materials, and they were all on full display. One of the breakthrough examples comes from our very own UWI, the Cave Hill campus. I don't know how many of you saw the feature in the recent newspaper article. And I say our because I'm also a proud product of the UWI system, having graduated from this campus, and then also served as staff, both at the campus level and the regional level. CAF was indeed a proud sponsor for the participation of Dr. Legina Henry of the UWI Cave Hill campus, and she was able to put the spotlight on the Caribbean's first bio-CNG vehicle, which is being powered by biogas derived from sargassum. It is a bold initiative and an innovative step towards creating new forms of sustainable energy for our region. Other entrepreneurs have found unique ways of turning sargassum seaweed into sweet-smelling, healthy skincare products. And the range of projects demonstrate to us what is possible when we bring together talent, partnerships, financing, and support, policy support for innovation. Innovation is therefore equally about building a culture that embraces new ideas, encourages creativity, and promotes collaboration across every sector. Academia, government, industry, civil society, international development, and so many more. But the culture shift that is needed begins with you. And at CAF, our mission is clear. We are committed to accelerating innovation and creating resilient, sustainable economies across Latin America and the Caribbean. And we support efforts like this, as well as provide agile and flexible financing for public and private sector projects. Our School for Digital Transformation and Innovation is equipping regional leaders to go beyond and to work with policymakers to develop their skills necessary to accelerate digital transformation and innovation in their respective countries, from the Bahamas to Suriname. We were also pleased to recognize the students who benefited from scholarships from the AFS Global STEM Academy just last week an American-based organization providing intercultural exchange opportunities and immersive STEM training for students from Trinidad and Tobago. And we would like to see this expanded across the Caribbean. We also plan to launch, in the near future, a program for postgraduate scholars in science and sustainability to help drive the transformation of scientific research, the translation of scientific research into development policy and programming across the Caribbean. This is how we are able to create connections between research, knowledge, and innovation, as well as development impact. In the Caribbean, connectivity is not just about the internet and access to the internet. It's about access to opportunity. Enhanced infrastructure will therefore provide the foundation for more remote work, telemedicine, distance education, and e-government services, which are particularly crucial for nations with dispersed populations and for states where, of course, in the Caribbean, as you know, we have states like the Bahamas, where there are several family islands that will require increased connectivity for enhanced government services and public services. So expanding access to high-speed internet will also foster economic diversification, empowering local entrepreneurs and small businesses to participate in the global digital economy. And CAF's commitment to promoting infrastructure development includes support for submarine cables, satellite systems, and the expansion of broadband networks with an emphasis on affordability, reliability, and resilience. These efforts ensure that our island states are not left behind, but are instead positioned to compete on the global stage. In the Caribbean, digital transformation is also tightly linked to climate resilience. And as we know, our islands are on the front lines of rising sea levels and extreme weather events. So digital solutions play a critical role in mitigating these risks. Technologies like big data analytics, artificial intelligence, and the Internet of Things can help governments and communities better predict and respond to environmental threats and also to manage natural resources more efficiently, thereby creating early warning systems that can save lives. Moreover, the adoption of clean technologies and the development of smart cities can help reduce carbon footprint and ensure that the region can sustainably manage its urban and rural spaces. So CAF has been at the forefront of promoting digitalization of key sectors, including agriculture, tourism, energy, and fisheries, sectors that are vital to the Caribbean's economic fabric, and of course, across our social sectors, healthcare, education, and so many more. By incorporating digital innovations into these industries, we can improve efficiency and reduce the environmental impact as we build more resilient communities. So, students, ladies and gentlemen, today's event marks the official launch of our CAF Innovation Series in the Caribbean, and as a catalyst for accelerating innovation-based economies. And this is a region, as you know, where 60% of the population is under 30 years old. And therefore, this mission becomes even more critical. And you all have a vital role to play. You're not just the leaders of tomorrow, you are the innovators of today. You're the ones who will develop the technologies, the industries, the policies, and that will guide and help to define our future. And so as a regional development bank, we are keen to contribute to processes and spaces where the young people of the Caribbean are empowered to realize their full potential. This is why there's no place more fitting for this conversation to happen than right here at the University of the West Indies, a space where knowledge and innovation have always gone hand in hand. Now, in this spirit, I felt it is still extremely important, even in his absence, to take a moment to pay tribute to a true visionary in our region, one of our very own here at UWI St. Augustine, Professor Patrick Hossain, who was recently awarded the nation's highest recognition, the Order of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. He is and has been a pioneer in the field of computer science and a driving force behind digital transformation in the Caribbean. Professor Hossain's contributions have been nothing short of extraordinary, and we applaud his hard work and dedication and commitment to advancing the digital agenda of our nation and inspiring so many other countries to see what is possible when you harness the power of technology for good. Innovation does not happen in a vacuum. It takes all of us working together. And with that, we can show, as we have done in so many different areas, that small islands can deliver big solutions. So these big solutions come from you, and they will be powered by science and innovation. That's why this evening's panel discussion is so important. So at this stage, I'm going to introduce our guests, and it gives me great pleasure to just share with you a little bit about their background. Firstly, Dr. Camille Wardrop-Allain, who's originally from Trinidad and Tobago, is an aerospace executive, rocket engineer, space scientist, internationally acclaimed speaker, writer, and educational leader. She's a science ambassador whose accomplishments in the field of space exploration have been extraordinary. She's one of the most recognized women in aerospace engineering and one of the few women of color to have served in senior leadership positions at NASA. Dr. Allain is the founder and CEO of Arusha Space, a global space solutions and consulting firm that uses space to enable sustainable and socioeconomic development. Prior to this, she had a 28-year career advancing the areas of aerospace and space technology development at NASA. She was a leading architect for several NASA commercialization strategies, enabling billion-dollar space economies in low Earth orbit and on the moon. She was the first African American to lead a major human space flight program at NASA. Dr. Allain, please join us on stage, join me on stage. Thank you. Next up, we'll have Mr. Alex Figueroa, who joined the Trust at the end of February 2018, where he is currently serving as Chief Operating Officer. In that capacity, he is responsible for the management and operation of an internal team which supports the areas of finance, business planning, budgeting, human resources, administration, and IT. Prior to joining the Trust, Alex worked at the General Secretariat of the OAS, Organization of American States. Starting as a field accountant, he worked his way through the ranks and culminated a 17-year career as the Chief Financial Operations Officer for the OAS, where he supervised a staff of 40 colleagues and had responsibility for the OAS's financial operations in Washington and across their 29 offices across the hemisphere. After leaving the OAS in December 2011, he started a company providing services in accounting, advisory, and taxes. And now it gives me great pleasure to invite Alex Figueroa to join us on the stage. Next, we have Dr. Curtis Charles, who is a distinguished academic leader who currently serves as the Dean and Director of Academic Affairs at the UWI Five Islands campus in Antigua and Barbuda, which recently hosted a highly successful and oversubscribed conference on artificial intelligence in July. Dr. Charles has a doctorate in education. However, his expertise extends beyond academia, encompassing areas such as curriculum development, student support, and faculty development. As the Dean and Director of Academic Affairs, Dr. Charles plays a pivotal role in fostering a vibrant learning environment. His vision aligns with UWI's mission of advancing knowledge, fostering critical thinking, and empowering future leaders. Prior to joining UWI, Dr. Charles served as the Vice President for Research, Development, and Innovation at RLM Communications, where he oversaw design, development, and innovation of new products and services for big data analytics, artificial intelligence, machine learning, biometrics, and cybersecurity. In addition, Dr. Charles has served as a senior business strategy and engagement in Japan, Taiwan, Korea, and United Kingdom, and this was with IBM Global Services. And more recently, Dr. Charles served as a solution architect and predictive insights lead for key education objectives at Microsoft Services. To guide us, please join us on stage, Dr. Charles. To guide us through the session, we will have our esteemed moderator, Mr. Kamal Georges, who is our CAF communications specialist and who really needs no introduction in Trinidad and Tobago. But do allow me, Mr. Georges has more than 15 years' experience in the media and communications industry. His career has spanned both the private and public sectors, and he's a proud graduate of UWI, having also served as a member of the UWI St. Augustine Gender Advisory Board. Kamal, please join us. Thank you. So thank you very much for your time with us this afternoon, for your interest, and I now hand you over to our distinguished moderator and panelists.
All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you very much, Dr. Stacy Richards-Kennedy, for your introductions and also for setting the stage for this evening's discussion, putting into context the importance of accelerating innovation-based societies here in the Caribbean. And it is important because we know the results of innovation-based societies. We have greater productivity, better performing economies, and the livelihood and well-being of citizens are improved. So the question that lies before us is, how do we accelerate those economies, that type of economy here in the Caribbean? And that's a question that I want all of our panelists to weigh in on, because they're coming from diverse sectors and have very different perspectives on what we should be doing to ensure that we have an innovation-based society here in Trinidad and across the Caribbean. And so I will go this way, and I'll ask Mr. Figueroa to weigh in on that question.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you all for being here this evening. So from our perspective, and just to give you a little background, the Trust for the Americas is affiliated with the Organization of American States. We've been around for over 25 years. We've impacted 5.5 million lives during that period of time, operated in 29 countries with over 1,000 local partners. And what we've found is that collaboration is one of the keys. When we bring together public sector, private sector, academia, and local partners, strong local partners that know the territory and can guide us, collaboration and an open discussion is part of the key there. Skills training. You know, there's what we learn in traditional school and traditional curriculums, but it's also important that we provide skills for the digital age, digital information that we have, and that is always changing on us. So skills training, updated skills training, so that our folks are ready to step into the challenges that are out there. And lastly, it's funding. We have to have the infrastructure that's required I always give the example, it's wonderful if you have a car, but you've got to have a decent road to get from point A to point B. And so infrastructure to carry the technology that we need and to support, you know, entrepreneurs, new startups, all that is important in getting us to that stage.
It's interesting that you said funding because at the conference in Grenada, at the Sargassum conference, that was one of the key outcomes, the need for funding to ensure that the ideas become reality to treat with this problem. From the perspective of academia, Dr. Charles, and also you have experience outside of that in the tech space, what is required here in the Caribbean, and tell us a little bit about the work that you are doing at the UWI Five Islands campus as well to help spurn some of those.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for being here, and greetings on behalf of our principal and students at Five Island campus. So the Five Island campus started in 2019, and that's important. And we started with 174 students. 5 years later, we are 1,100 students, which is an exponential growth. So we know that there is a need for education, but it's just not a need for any education. When we look at the enrollment this year and registration, about half of that registration is based on new academic program, and not just new academic program, innovative academic programs. So when I came in 2020, I looked around and I asked the simple question, why aren't we seeing technology everywhere, right? Because we were born in 2019, which was the midst of the fourth industrial revolution. And yet there was no sign of the fourth industrial revolution on campus. We absorbed all the programs in the School of Business and Management, Health and Behavioral Sciences, and the School of Humanities and Education. We have absorbed those programs from K-ville. And I think it's the start that is important. We needed to start, but we just can't stay there. So one of the first things coming from Microsoft that I asked the principal is, could we start an institute or a center on artificial intelligence? So if you know anything about UWI management, you have to write a paper for everything, right? If you don't write a paper, it's not going to get done. So we wrote the paper, and probably senior management team meeting, probably halfway through the presentation, he said, well, why don't we go for the school? So that was really important for us because we wanted to create innovators, but we really wanted to create something that was catalytic, right? So the School of Science, Computing, and Artificial Intelligence is one of the fastest growing schools on campus since it started. And we didn't just want to create a school to create the next generation artificial intelligence specialists, although that is one of the objectives. But we wanted to make sure that students in the School of Business and Management doesn't graduate unless they understand business intelligence. So he's come to the School of Science, Computing, and Artificial Intelligence, which we call SUSCI, to do that. And the students in Health and Behavioral Sciences doesn't graduate unless they understand health informatics, right? Which is what COVID was all about. Every time you fill out that information about who you met, who you saw, did you come in contact with anyone, that was data that was being collected, and if analyzed and algorithms run on it, you could have tell where the virus was moving. And students in education need to come and understand sentiment analysis, because if you understand sentiment analysis, then you could create precision education. So it was really important to us on a larger scale to really be a catalyst and basically be there for the students who are not necessarily tech-driven, but know and understand that they have to be involved in tech. So for us, it was very, very purposeful. The conference we had in July was just one of those other things that we had planned in 2021. We had planned that if we're going to have a school, we need to have a conference around that school. And the conference was very simple. I knew from working in the States that there were Caribbean leaders everywhere around the world leading tech. Could we bring those leaders together for 3 days in Antigua and Barbuda and talk about how we reimagine the digital transformation of the Caribbean in an age of the fifth industrial revolution and generative AI? And that has spawned an awesome opportunity to have different discussions. And I want to thank CAF for being a sponsor as well for the conference. We'll talk some more.
And Dr. Charles, as the conversation goes on, I want us to speak about some of the unique pairings that you you are creating at UWI Five Islands campus, because it really speaks to the heart of who we are as a Caribbean and creating specific innovations in the areas of healthcare. But we'll get to that because I want to get Dr. Camille's perspective on what is required for us to generate innovation-based societies. Here in the Caribbean, you've been at the pinnacle of, I would say, where science can reach in space engineering, and you've seen the economies that can be created around it. How can that benefit the region, and also what is required from us, from our policymakers, from private sector, and so on?
Okay, thank you so much. So I will start with, you are not born an innovator, right? You are trained and developed into innovators. And I feel like we have to start at our primary and secondary school level. And you talk about reimagine. What does curricula look like that we can grow and develop innovators? You don't just get to university and you tell somebody, oh, you should be an innovator. And then they wake up the next day and that doesn't happen. You have to foster an environment that really allows young people to think critically about the world around them, right? Ask questions. Why is this happening? How can we solve this? So you go through that process, right? And you train them to come up with those type of solutions. So you got to start at the lowest level. And if you have that throughout your curriculum, high school, college, then you start spawning these kind of innovators. Then you have to have visionary leaders who want to put systems in place that would generate sustainable development solutions, right? I came here in 2013. I wanted to see how the Caribbean could really, space technology was becoming a big thing. And I wanted to see how the Caribbean, I didn't want us to be left behind. So how could we start thinking about space-based technologies, satellites, for solving problems here? And I couldn't get any traction because people just couldn't see it. I think now people are more open, leaders are more open. And so how do we put these systems in place in UWI, in Kariri, in these training environments where you start thinking about how can I use this technology? How can I start training folks to develop even small cube satellites, 10 by 10 by 10, start very small, right? And using those to start looking at the world and this region in a different way.
Part of what is required to ensure that innovation is alive in the Caribbean is retaining the people who we train in innovation. And so you speak about, upskilling them with digital skills, updated skills. Dr. Charles, you speak about training them in AI and marrying AI with business and with health. And you speak about policy decisions that are required. But the challenge that we have is the brain drain. We train, but the society is not necessarily innovating fast enough to keep the people who we are training for these positions, right? And who are required to help us create innovative societies. How do we address that particular challenge in the Caribbean to ensure that we retain our talent? I'll start with you, Dr. Elaine, and then we will.
You gotta have an environment that fosters. So you want to create opportunities for the young people, right? So I'm thinking, okay, you go away and you study biomedical engineering. Actually, this is a real example because I was mentoring a young woman. She came to UWI and then she went abroad to England to study biomedical engineering. She had an island scholarship, so she had to come back and serve and give her time back. And she could not get a job in biomedical engineering because there are no opportunities here for her to be able to take what she's learned. And they wanted to, give her a job behind a desk, and she would have been 2 years out of studying. And you know, when you're out of the field, you lose kind of the state of the art, what's going on.
Right.
And so it was a real struggle for a real frustration, to the point where she was like, I'm going back out. I'm going to go to a university in the States and do my master's degree and hope I could stay there and get a job. So how do we create these opportunities where our students, our young people could go away and train, and then they could come back here, and when they come back, there are jobs for them to be able to put that skills, those experiences to work to make our country a better place.
Dr. Charles, what is required for that to happen?
Yes, so I will take a different twist. And I think education is so important that when we teach students, we naturally teach a student to come out and get a job, right? And almost all students I come in touch with, from the moment they come in the first year, is I say, you need to think like an entrepreneur, right? So if you think like an entrepreneur, you really don't have a safety net. You have no 401k, you have no savings, you out there and you're going to be eternally hungry to create and innovate. So for me, when I think about innovating the Caribbean economy, I think about setting the atmosphere from the moment you get into college. I mean, and it really should be in the high schools as well. I was given the example this morning, one of the reasons why you see China is accelerating so much in AI and digital transformation is because China is producing entrepreneurs from computer science programs out the wazoo. Those students are coming out with products. And which is one of the things that I would like to see us do. I would like to see that our young people want to innovate. And it doesn't really matter whether you could get a job or not. And I happen to believe that good ideas will always find the money, right? I mean, I think the fact that we're having this discussion with the funding agency, development agency, I think it's important. I think it's a signal to all the students who are in the audience that, look, you have an agency here who is willing to support innovative ideas, go out and develop it. So I think for me, it starts within the classroom. But it's, you asked just now about some of the innovative programs. If you think about COVID again, COVID has taught us so much, right? But before COVID, we were told that prescription drugs are very expensive because it takes a long time to develop, 10, 15 years, and it takes millions of dollars. Yet, we had a vaccine in 2 years. You go and Google vaccine and artificial intelligence. A major part of how that drug was developed was using and leveraging artificial intelligence. So we got a call probably like a year ago from the community college and says, Dr. Charles, are you interested in developing a pharmacy program? It didn't take me 2 seconds to say no. I say, but if you are interested in innovating and you are interested in pushing the technology further beyond just somebody coming out and prescribing a drug, then you could talk to me. So we started talking about generative pharmacy. We have created at Five Islands campus one of the first generative pharmacy programs that I know of, which is using artificial intelligence and machine learning to create new drugs and new patient care. And that is how we're going to become innovative. So that everybody here know that your belly hurt, your grandmother tell you go outside and pull some bush, right? Well, those bush have enzymes that we have never really commercialized because the drug company have told us it was too expensive and we didn't have technology like artificial intelligence. So now we could analyze these enzymes and all these drugs. People say soursop cures cancer. We don't know because we haven't examined it. We didn't have the money as large pharma. But now we could create a whole new industry within the Caribbean where our students would want to stay and create rather than going to big pharma and have a brain drain. So I think if you create the atmosphere, if you create the need for students, they will want to stay here. Students don't want to go to the US unless the education take them there. I mean, I went to the US because there wasn't any degrees in architecture. And I could tell you, I was listening to you just now, and innovation is really taught. Innovation is really taught. Listen, in architecture, you have to come up with a concept. Somebody said they want you to build a building at the top of a hill. You have to come up with a concept. You have to do geological testing to see whether there's oil or water under there. You have to basically do site plans. You have to work with mechanicals, structural, civil engineers. You have to come up with a design that fits that person's needs and wants. Do they like to look out to the ocean? Do they like to eat close to the bedroom? We had, in 5 years at Howard, every semester we had 3 design juries. That means that in 5 years you had 30 juries. A jury is a panel of professors, you presenting, and they tell you how bad your design is. And your job is to get to that point of graduation where they are speechless. So my thesis was food production in a controlled environment on land, at sea, and in space, funded by a Japanese company. And that's what innovation is all about.
You mentioned the role of multilateral development companies like CAF, and CAF is proud to be a part of and sponsor this. And Dr. Richards-Kennedy, I want us to talk a little bit about the role that you see for agencies like CAF to make those key connections. You spoke about in your remarks that ecosystem, connecting business with the public sector, with multilateral development agencies and so on. How important is it that we create those connections?
Well, thank you, Kamal. It's absolutely essential because that's really at the heart of what we're trying to achieve, because we cannot do it alone. We need to work together, and we need to really activate what is SDG 17, Partnerships for the Global Goals. So in the area of digital transformation, innovation, and so on, we have to bring that philosophy into being, and at every level. So, at the student level, but of course, among business people, entrepreneurs, policymakers, government representatives, we really have to look at how we strengthen the linkages and the connections and work more closely together. And so, being able to have opportunities for dialogue such as this one, and to create spaces where we bring persons together from different sectors, that's part of, stimulating the process. Because when you have persons in the space, the ideas flow, and then we can come up with solutions together. We can co-create new products or new processes or new ways of thinking, and then lean on each other to see this through to fruition. And I think we do need to see more of that collaborative spirit, and we're happy to play that role in terms of facilitating such discussions. And as we saw in Grenada, with a conference with close to 300 participants, there were several development banks present, because no one bank can finance the solutions that we need on its own. So we had CAF there, we had the IDB there, we had World Bank, we had the European Investment Bank, we had so many others, the Caribbean Development Bank, and so on. And we had private sector, we had the individual entrepreneurs, big businesses from Europe who had been already doing innovations in sargassum management, and then coming together to work with some of our regional entrepreneurs to see how we can scale some of those initiatives, or how they can learn from each other and do things differently and take their entrepreneurial ideas to the next level. So I think that's a concrete example of how partnerships in action can benefit everyone, can really expand the pie, and therefore, we need not be too concerned about, trying to hide what each other is doing, but rather to share more, and therefore stimulate more opportunities for growth, for advancement, for funding, and for partnership.
Some key themes already coming through in this conversation, and it's where Mr. Figueroa started, which is collaboration is one of the key factors in accelerating innovation-based societies here in the Caribbean. You mentioned digital skilling programs in your first response. How do we align those programs to the skills or to the needs of Caribbean countries to ensure that they are aligned with the development needs, for example, of countries across the Caribbean, and how important is that?
So let me just step back to the term brain drain. Personally, I don't like that term, because I think it's more a flight to opportunity, right? I think that really a flight to opportunity really describes why a lot of people migrate somewhere else. And so I've always, I know it's an accepted term. I always like to think of it as a flight to opportunity. But to your point, what we have to do is we map to market. Whenever we go into a new endeavor, a new project, we go out and we try to figure out what it is that's needed in that local area. That's why local partners for us are so important. We have the basic recipe for training and skilling, but each different scenario, each different theater provides us with a slightly different niche, a slightly different taste to how we get there. So for us, figuring out what's available, what will be available, and teaching to that, training to that, really makes a big difference for us in having folks have the general digital skills that are required, but then giving them that additional module of information that will set them up, make them employable in many cases for the jobs that are out there. We did that in our project in Jamaica, where we used AI tools to listen, even at the parish level, what was available, and to teach and to train folks for what was out there available. So our content is continually evolving depending on what is the need for that local area. We want to empower individuals to have the skills that are in demand. You see that nowadays. You see that with water management. You see that with AI. With water management, we have a project, our first project, that's on both sides of the southern border in the United States. One's running in Texas, the other one's running in Ciudad Juarez in Mexico. It's something that we really weren't doing up until about a year and a half ago. But water is such a scarce commodity today and will be a scarcer commodity tomorrow. So if we train individuals, if we figure out what it is that's going to be needed, this is a good way to give individuals an opportunity and innovation. I heard a lot about entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is the spark to economies, right? And Dr. Charles talks about that. And it's, if we have a fertile environment where we give people the opportunity and the permission to fail and try again, I think that is so important and vital for us to have a robust, innovative economy in our region.
So I want us to start drilling down into some specific areas. So for example, when we hear about space technology and the use of space technology, it's not necessarily about going to space, but it's about using the technology to help protect small island developing states, for example, here in the Caribbean, for climatic events. And so, Dr. Camille, I wanted you to walk us through what are some of the ways that space technology and innovation in that space can help small island developing states here in the Caribbean, whether it be in terms of modeling, to understand when they might be a threat for, let's say, natural disasters, things like sea level rise. You mentioned agriculture earlier today to support. Talk us through that, some of the specifics of how those can work.
First of all, we need to have our own assets in the region and stop relying on foreign assets to get data. That's what we do, because we don't have our own satellites, right? We're relying on the US Geological Survey and NOAA and all these for weather predictions the day or two before a massive hurricane is about to hit. So we need to work on investing in our own technologies. And that requires funding, so we need to talk about that. And if we had our own, so we may have a satellite in geosynchronous orbit, which is about 33,000 kilometers above our Earth. But what happens is it looks down on this region. It's focused on this region. And so you can see patterns, you can see trends over time, and as you start gathering that data and analyzing that data, then you start to be able to develop policies right? You can start predicting patterns, and you can start developing policies that can support the development of our region. This is one of the most disaster-prone, if not the most disaster-prone region in the world, and the level of vulnerability that we have as small island states is staggering. And how many lives do we lose every year, and how many thousands or millions of dollars of property that's lost every year because we don't have tools and techniques and processes and policies in place that allow us to predict what is happening and then put policies in place to move people out of the way or fortify structures that are able to withstand these disasters. And so we have to talk about how do we grow our own indigenous capabilities. First, let's start there. Invest in that, right? And then you start training folks to be able to take that data, analyze that data, and start coming up with solutions that could solve our problems right here. Got to start with ownership.
So that's from a space technology standpoint. From an education standpoint, Dr. Charles, what is required specifically from an education standpoint, whether it be through curriculum reform, aligning the region's curriculum to innovation needs? What is required in that space to ensure that we create the society that is innovative?
So, great question. So, for me, I could talk about UWI. So I've been here going on 5 years, and I'm still a visitor, and it's good to be a visitor. So, and as a visitor, you observe. And when I think about data science, and I think about artificial intelligence, and I think about the fact that it's transforming all of our lives, and in a sense, academic institutions are a little bit behind the technology. How do we catch up with the technology, and how do we make it part of an innovative tool? For me, we have to, in business we say, culture trumps, or culture eats strategy lunch every day, or culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I think there has to be in our academic institution a culture of data, right? It has to be that we respect what data is. We respect the fact that we collect certain types of data, and we respect the fact that that data is going to be used to make certain critical decisions. For us as institutions to be making critical decisions without the proper data in the midst of where we are right now, it's insane to me. So there has to be a leadership understanding of what the data could do, what the capabilities are, in order for us to get to the point that we say we're going to use this data for analytics. I mean, to piggyback on the point with the disasters, I mean, we take it a step further, right? So predictive analytics, you would be able to predict whether the hurricane and how the hurricane is moving, but almost all when we look at the Caribbean region, we know that the hurricanes are going to be moving, and we know that we could look at the patterns of the last 10 years, historical data, to see where the patterns are going. But what we want to do is to take that further and say, okay, based on the predictions, how could we use forecast-based finance modeling to basically allow the governments to come to somebody like CAF or the World Bank and said, listen, we know that if a level 5 hits our island, then we are going to need $60 million or X amount of $1 million, so that you have that $1 million set aside, or you know that in your budget, you need to set aside a certain amount of money for catastrophic disasters. What has been happening is that we have been responsive as it hit us. Yeah. And we have the technology using data that could do that. So those are just some ideas that I think we could use.
At this point, I would also like to especially welcome all of those who are viewing this online, whether it be via UWI TV. It's also being streamed on CAF's website and on YouTube. And at this point, we would like to invite you, those who've been listening in, that you can share your questions through UWI TV, and we'll try to get some in, as many in as possible. And very soon we'll be coming to you in the audience to hear any questions that you may have for members of this panel. Speaking of specifics, I wanted to speak to you, Mr. Figueroa, because we were speaking about earlier and in our conversations about nearshoring, right? How can nearshoring opportunities, particularly in industries like chip manufacturing, how can those be leveraged to build a more robust ecosystem here in Trinidad and also the wider Caribbean?
So I think that's going to be a great opportunity for our region. I really do. I think nearshoring is going to happen in the very short term, but we have to prepare right now. We have to have our citizens trained and ready for those jobs. We have to have the infrastructure, because it is a infrastructure heavy, chip making technology is infrastructure heavy. So after the post-pandemic, we've learned a few lessons. Geopolitical tensions are giving us other nudges. A lot of the jobs, a lot of the manufacturing that's occurring in other parts of the world will be coming into our hemisphere. And I think that that really gives us a wonderful opportunity here in the Caribbean to have manufacturing on a scale that we haven't seen in a while. And so it is important for us to start, our governments to start investing in the infrastructure that's needed for connectivity. It's important for us to think beyond our traditional curriculums and think of the digital skills that are going to be necessary to have ready workforce for that nearshoring that's coming.
A lot of these things, a lot of these ideas require financing mechanisms. And we spoke about this earlier and in our conversation about what are the necessary financing mechanisms that are required. And I'll also ask Dr. Richards-Kennedy to weigh in on this. But first you, and then Dr. Richards.
So, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can have, and I say this colloquially, I think Caribbeans are some of the most innovative people I know. I know my grandfather, I'm Cuban, my grandfather would tinker with a lamp until it worked. And it wasn't as though he replaced a part, he actually found a solution for what was wrong with that piece of equipment. And so I think that naturally we're innovative. I think that when those ideas come up, it requires funding to make them a reality, either by grants, low interest loans. You know, I have to say our first innovation lab in Mexico in 2016 was actually made a reality through a grant from the CAF. And so our first innovation lab was because we received a grant from the CAF. And that's the kind of spark, that's the kind of support that's needed to have that innovation and that entrepreneurial spirit come up with ideas and bring them to fruition.
Great, thanks for that. And you know, thinking more broadly around financing mechanisms, it really depends on, you know, not only the sector, but also the stakeholder. So for a development bank, there are a range of instruments that we use or we can make available in order to bring funding to the table. So in some cases it would be grants. In other cases, it could be loans, but in some cases with private sector operations, for example, it could be lines of credit, it could be blended financing, it could be guarantees or different types of, you know, co-financing. So in our case, we first start with an assessment of the idea or the project, and then we take it from there. In terms of bringing in different specialists into the conversation virtually and trying to see how we can firstly better understand what is on the table and then facilitate by coming up with some, you know, providing some solutions. But the other part of the puzzle that I think is really interesting is that it's a mindset as well, right? So knowing that everybody needs to be more innovative. And even within the bank, that's part of what defines us. So CAF is always being very much self-reflecting on how we do our business and how we can continually improve and innovate, not only in our business processes, but also in the financial instruments that we bring to the table. And this is even more relevant for Caribbean states. And that's a point that our executive president and our vice president emphasize all the time, because we recognize that when we're dealing with small economies, and we recognize also that the Caribbean states are dealing with other vulnerabilities, and that small economies react differently when they have to deal or overcome other shocks. That therefore the development community and the development partners need to be ready to support these countries in very flexible, agile, and innovative ways. And that's something that defines our culture at CAF.
Thank you very much, Dr. Richards-Kennedy. We've been speaking for about 40 minutes there or so, and so I want to ensure that we get participation from the audience and the people who we've invited to be a part of this conversation. So at this point, the floor is open for any questions that you may have, and just by the raise of your hand, we should be able to get a microphone to you. We have one to the front, and I encourage all of the students as well to think about some of the questions that you have. As Dr. Richards-Kennedy stated, this is really about you. You are the innovators, not of the future, but of today. And so any questions that you may have for the panel, really now is the time to ask them. One second. They'll probably give me a signal once it's ready. Okay, go ahead. Yes. Okay. One sec. Someone is coming.
The kiss of life. Okay there. Really very rich discussion. Thank you all. A few questions. I'm going to rattle them off really fast. Ingredients to build innovators. If you wait spontaneously, you have an innovator pop up every 7 to 12 years who's good. But we want to build them. What are the ingredients apart from funding, which will allow us to build innovators? Societal innovators, of course, must have an appetite for risk. And we tend to be really risk averse in the region, in and out of academia. AI literacy is, of course, a basic computing literacy. Now it's like being able to use Word and PowerPoint was 20 years ago. So everyone needs to be literate in AI, machine learning, all of it. And catching up with technology, that's an interesting one. It begs the question, what is the value of basic education? Because with the value of tertiary education in particular, under pressure from different quarters, I would argue that a robust basic education is what permits us to pivot with disruptive technologies. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That is a lot, Professor Copeland. I'm taking the first one.
Ingredients.
Y'all figure out what y'all want.
Ingredients to build innovators.
Building innovators is building critical thinkers and building problem solvers. So how, again, I go back to how do we structure, especially high school, right? Like that's where the rubber meets the road. How do we structure our science curriculum, our math curriculum? You know, bringing project-based learning, having students work in teams, because that's what you're gonna do. We can't solve a problem by ourselves. So how do you start bringing them together, having different roles, right? Defining a problem, going through that, the hypothesis-based learning, right? What do you think is gonna happen? What are the different possible solutions you can come up with? How do you analyze those solutions and optimize to the best? Like you have to start that at the earliest level. That's how you're gonna build innovators. And so we have to think, I mean, I was saying growing up, and I still think it happens today, where we are taught to memorize theories, and you are tested on your level of memorization. That is not supporting innovation and critical thinking. And so we gotta kind of reshape, retool, transform our education system to be able to develop that level.
I want to pick back on that because, Dean, I think as educators, one of the things we have to be brave enough to do is to rethink whether what we're doing is right. I'll give you an example. My brother's an actuary, and he goes to a lot of conferences, and he was saying that many of the conferences now focus on data science because the actuaries are now saying, boy, did I really calculate correctly with the insufficient data or the, so if actuaries could do that, I think we could do that. I don't think that we create innovators if a student knows that it has to get an A or B. Right? I just don't. I think what we produce in are students who have to get a first class, a second class, and as we were telling students earlier, no one has ever asked me what's my GPA. In all my life I've worked. So I know it's a big thing at UE, and I think that's really cool that you come out with a first class. But the reality is that if you suspend those things, then you begin to learn. I remember in graduate school, the best class I had was system dynamics, using mathematical modeling to solve complex problems. I got the best C I ever got. I mean, because I was determined. I was in a class with all engineers, and the engineers and MBA students were blowing up it. But that wasn't why I went to the class. And that class changed my life in grad school. Because I suspended the fact that I'm in this so grade. So actually, with two of us from Marino, were in grad school together, and we would close down the lab at night, and we will open the lab in mornings. But we were determined. I think he got an A, but I got a C. But we were determined that we were going to learn. So I think the fact that all of our students are so focused on this grade that I kind of think about Bob Marley, emancipate yourself from mental slavery. I mean, it's like our students' minds are not emancipated because it's clamored and tied on into, well, I need to do this right. No, this is the only opportunity where you have to experiment. After this, somebody's going to ask you, you're getting paid and you need to do it right. So when are you going to be able to experiment? This is the time to experiment.
The other part of the question was risk. How do we create an appetite for risk among our students and innovators in the region?
Well, if I can jump in, just from personal experience, I mean, I think that you have to embrace failure. You don't want to live in that space because success has to be part of your life. But you learn more when you fail than when you succeed. And I think that if you embrace that and you accept the fact, man, I'm going to fail, you're not tight, right? You're okay, and you accept the fact that I'm not going to get it right from the first time or maybe the second time. Now, hopefully by the 10th time, I figured it out. But you've got to give yourself that leniency, and you've got to receive that leniency. And I think that frees you up, frees your mind up to kind of think in a different way. If you're always trying to get that 4.0 or trying to get that A, man, you're just learning to the test, right? And so it's important, but I think a change, a shift from A driven to I'm going to explore, I'm going to try, I'm going to accept that I might fail, but I'm going to learn from that failure.
Failure to me is necessary. I happen to, most of you who may have read my story in the Express earlier this week, I failed common entrance. Could you imagine failing that exam at 11, walking on the streets to be able to pay for evening classes? But after that failure, it's our largest high-stake test that we're going to take. And when you fail at 11, you learn that there are other things more important. You learn to deal with failure more. And I am convinced that failure is God's way of shifting you into a different direction. Had I passed common entrance, I probably might have been still in Trinidad. I probably might have been still hanging out. But I became an educator because I failed. Because now I could show students the value of education. If I could fail common entrance, never go to high school, become a faculty, a department head, head of academics, as well as a university president, you could do anything and leave without having gone to high school, have the ability to go to me, what I consider one of the most prestigious technology institution, MIT. I mean, failure, I was never afraid that MIT was going to tell me no. There was no way they were going to tell me no, because I failed at 11. So failure in the future becomes futile. And sometimes we're not asking you to fail, but I used to say in Microsoft, you got to fail and recover quickly. Fail fast and recover.
Recover quickly.
But understand that you're going to fail. The last thing I would like to say is, I mentioned this morning, my daughter is doing her PhD in chemistry. And for all of you who might be in a PhD, I mean, she called home crying, long tears last week. Dad, I just want to give this up. I just want to give this up. It's too much. I'm doing everything for the advisor, and I'm still not moving. I want to give this up. And I told her, as a brown young girl in science, you're going to have to deal with this demon throughout your life. You're going to be the only young brown girl who is a scientist, so you might as well deal with it now, because they're not going to give it to you. So for us, we had this attitude in our household that it was okay to fail fast, but move on. So after a pop talk between myself and the mom, she's back on track. How are you doing, Jessica? I'm kind of okay, I'm still worried. Don't be worried, because the one thing you know is that you're going to graduate. We cannot keep you here forever. So experiment and fail, because this is the best of your life.
Somebody might be disagreeing with you on not staying in UE forever. But there was one final part of the question before we go to one of the questions in the audience, was catching up with the technology, and what is the value then of a basic education? Okay. In the meantime, while you ponder on that question, we'll have a question from a member of the audience.
Good afternoon to the audience. My name is Simon Neptune.
Hi, good evening, Simon.
My question specifically to Dr. Charles, but also for the rest of the panel. Just as context, NIHUS published a report a few years ago outlining local investment into R&D as a percentage of GDP. And Trinidad and Tobago was extremely, I think it was less than 1%, like 0.1%. And I also want to get Dr. Coburn's thoughts on this afterwards, because the Trinidad and Tobago Bureau of Standards recently published a standard for innovation management. And one of the things for myself personally, in speaking to my friends who would have gone to school in the States, for example, is that there's a process for them when they have ideas at university level. There's a process for them to try and fail and succeed, to sort of transfer from a student to a startup founder to actually implementing things. And we don't have that process locally. So while the experts would understand the issue very well, there's sort of a gap in alignment between what happens on the ground level. So Mr. Alexander also spoke about like the flight to opportunity. I think locally people would stay, but there's no process for people to actually, let's say a student here today, they might have an idea, they may be in Professor Coburn's class, but there's no process for them to take the idea and then prototype it, get seed funding, whatever. We have UE Ventures, we have Stacy, which are good programs, but they could do with a bit more work, I would say. So my question is really, how do we close that gap, basically?
Yeah, great question. So let me say, as a student in college, I have never had an opportunity where a representative of a development bank was on the stage. So the government may or may not through mechanisms, but you have an audience here today. You shouldn't leave this place today if you have an entrepreneur without giving our colleagues your card or without making contact. So that's the first thing. I also think that entrepreneurs are a different breed. They find a way to get the ideas funded. In the United States, we were talking about this morning, and for those of us who went to school abroad, Stacey went to school abroad, the government has SBTDC, SBIR, SBIR and STTIR. So SBIR is Small Business Innovation Research Fund. And that is a small business getting together with a faculty from a university and developing an innovation, right? The first round is 125,000 US, peanuts. But think about the millions of ideas the government get on that first round. So if the first round is a concept paper, if your concept paper is accepted, you get 125,000. Then the second round is a prototype. If your idea goes to prototype, you get $1.5 million. And then the third round, you get no money to help you commercialize your product. If you're making a product for the Department of Defense, you just need to have it 65%. They're going to take it on the field. But with the Department of Defense, you then have $50 million no-compete contract where you could just continue making the product for the Department of Defense. It's one of those ways that governments and agencies could basically adopt that works so well to get technology cheap. Listen, the majority of innovations in the US comes from universities. The majority. Listen, if you walk on MIT campus right now, that campus has expanded beyond when we were there in graduate school. Technology innovation. It is impossible to go to that institution and graduate and not come out and be an innovator. We talked about Legina earlier. Legina is from MIT. Where did she learn to innovate? It's in the air. It's you walk around. So where I sit in my office, I could look down and see the students gathering every day. And I'm just building up the nerve right now to walk with my stick and make sure that I run all the computer science students that I see there, because all they do is chit-chat. And I'm thinking, it's not in the air. Because if it's in the air, you would see them coding and solving a problem and try to develop an app. So it has to be not just governments, but it has to be the students who are interested in innovating, and it has to be something that you breathe, that innovation is like air to breathe. If I don't have it, I can't exist in this place. So for me, I think if there's one thing I see missing in our institutions is that. Where's the excitement? Where's the unrest? When I say unrest, I mean, you all seem very rested right now, but I don't mean unrest in terms of trouble. I mean that you seem comfortable, right? And this is not a generation that should be comfortable. This is a generation that has more technology accessible to you than we had when we were in college. If we had the technology that you have right now, we would have been trillionaires. You have that opportunity now. Don't wait to see whether this is an X% of GDP. You have the opportunity, and the other thing that you have is that you have a world that's connected like we never had. It's all in your hands, my brother. It's in your hands.
But I think what drives a lot of young, not young as in age, but young as in early entrepreneurs.
Early stages.
Yeah. Early entrepreneurs is the hope of making it big, being a billionaire. So the money, a lot of times, or the vision of getting a lot of money paid off for your technology, a lot of times is a motivator. And I don't know if our young people they see that available to them as a motivator or incentive, right? If governments were putting money into fostering innovative ideas, you may find a lot more raising their hands.
I agree with you, but I think we can't depend on the government. The government is a component, but we need this multi-pronged approach with the banks. I mean, if I knew there were like 5 banks there, I would have found my way to Grenada. Because as a dean, you're always looking for avenues for your students to basically get funding. And so to me, that is more of an important destination than going to the Antiguan government and says, look, we have this idea, could you help us sponsor it? Networking with the people who have the money. And the banks are not going to give money to ideas that are not going to be fruitful. So at least you know you would be good hands in talking to the bank. The government may take a chance on you, And the idea may or may not work because they're giving you your money, taxpayers' money. But the bank is where you want to partner with, the development banks.
Mr. Figueroa?
So just to jump in, we precisely create these little hubs of innovation, right? Right now, right here in Trinidad, since 2021, we've been having an innovation lab with Kariri, right? And great partner Kariri, they've really been very, very, very useful for our project. As of the end of last year, we've trained 831 individuals. And really what these little groups are just as what Dr. Charles mentioned in MIT, they're just bouncing ideas off of each other and coming up with solutions to problems that they know exists. There's a young man in Gasparillo, you guys know where it is better than I do, who developed an app, an emergency alert app. And so these are the kind of when you have individuals that know a problem, can define a problem, can then try to get a solution to that problem, and you put these groups together, these individuals together, it's a synergy, really a synergy that gets created. Because I might be thinking about this, but certainly that person and that person will come at it from a different angle, and together, I mean, really, this is what we talk about when we talk about collaboration with private sector, public sector, academia, civil society, local partners. But in a microcosm, local kids just like you guys are coming up with some neat ideas. And it's not just here in Belize, they're learning critical thinking, you know, a process for critical thinking. That project is going really well. The schools there are actually going to change their curriculum to adopt some of this critical thinking ideas and technology and ways of education. There's 350 plus centers throughout Latin America and the Caribbean that we somehow either financially support right now, or we continue supporting through licenses from Microsoft or content that we develop. But those hubs are so organically innovative that is where a lot of the solutions are going to come from. But that's a piece of the puzzle, because we need more investment, we need more infrastructure to have what's there grow just naturally.
I'd just like to follow on Alex's points to say that this dialogue was carefully curated for that very reason. Touching on some of the key aspects of bringing persons together to talk about this issue from different vantage points. And so I'm really thankful to each of you for sharing so openly those perspectives, because we have someone like you who's working across the Americas, but also with tangible programs supporting students in different countries, both in Latin America and in the Caribbean. And we have, of course, Camille, who's doing fantastic work from the science realm, but also with experience both in private and also in the civil society, NGO-funded side. And then academia and some previous private sector experience through Curtis's work. But what I really wanted to highlight is that bringing an academic from the Five Islands campus to this discussion here in Trinidad was key also in terms of that regionalism, dimension that UWI has, and that is so unique and so valuable for all of the students across UWI. And I know in times past, we had more students from across the region coming to St. Augustine. And over time, as other campuses developed programs, what you find is that there's a sort of a decreasing number of regional students. So from our perspective, we wanted to ensure, because we know here there's a lot happening on the ground in St. Augustine on science and innovation and computing, but we wanted to also use this platform to ensure that the students here are exposed firsthand to what's happening in Antigua and Barbuda and in the Eastern Caribbean through our very own regional university. And I think that's something that plays an important part in stimulating ideas, knowing what each other is doing, and for CAF, being that bridge between Latin America and the Caribbean, but also within the Caribbean in terms of connecting voices, connecting opportunities, connecting funding, connecting ideas. So I really just wanted to emphasize that point because nothing is by chance. And just so you know, after today's, there are several events that, that our panelists supported today. We also have meetings tomorrow to go further into and drill down some more into what can we do together and how would those collaborations look and how do they take shape and where can we support. So, thank you for the time that you've spent with us. Thanks to the campus community and the campus leadership for allowing us to be part of this dialogue with you and this journey. And we look forward to doing so much more together. Back to you, Kamal.
Thank you very much, Dr. Richards-Kennedy. I know we have a few more questions in the audience, but what I will ask is that we bring the official part of today's program to an end and close off with some closing remarks from each of our panelists, and we'll ask you to remain, and they will take your questions after we've closed off this official part. So I'll start from the end and leave the lady for last this time.
Well, just to thank everybody on the panel, thank Dr. Stacy, thank you, Kamal, for putting this together and inviting me. It really is meaningful for me to be here. Like I said, we have a very long-standing relationship with the CAF. We continue to hope to have that relationship in the future, but to thank you guys. I mean, I'm sure there's a bunch of things that you guys could have been doing this evening that wasn't to sit here. And so that, in and of itself, shows some initiative. And so thank you for being a part of this evening. I think that it's easy to do nothing, but taking a step and taking a second step is so important. So I want to thank everybody here, but I also want to thank you guys for being here tonight.
And I also want to thank CAF for being here. I have to tell you, when I got the call from Stacy, I was tremendously excited. Always looking for an opportunity to represent our university. And I really want to thank UWI as well, because I have to tell you, when I left here in 1980, I always was looking for an opportunity to give back to the Caribbean. And our campus presented that opportunity. I probably would have been still back home in the US doing what I was doing, probably would have been still working at Microsoft, but this new campus was like a different calling to me. We were no longer just looking at only students who had A-levels and CAPE. Our mission was access. How do we expand access for students in the OECS region, a region that had no UWI campus for a very, very long time, a region where only 2 in 10 persons have a tertiary education. So we have a mandate to expand that aggressively within the next 5 or 10 years. And that mission to be able to help to build a campus and in technology the aspect of technology that I love was really an opportunity. So I take it not lightly the fortune to be here, not only to be invited by CAF, but also to be given the opportunity by UWI. Because many of my colleagues who went to Howard with me in undergraduate, many of them want to give back. We just don't have the opportunity to do that. So I want to tell you that this is a unique opportunity to be able to not only give back, but give back in a meaningful way of something that I'm passionate about, which is education. So I thank UWI, I thank CAF, and look forward to the conversation. And for the students, I just want to leave you with the same thing I left the students with this morning. I hope that my story will make you restless. At some point in time, you're going to get discouraged as to whether you want to continue studying like my daughter or not. And when that happens, just think about, there's a little boy who was from Aruba. At 11 years old, sat common entrance. Failed that common entrance at 11. From 11 to 14, stayed in primary school. From 14 to 17, did everything legal, learned to sew. I could sew anything that you're wearing tonight. And at 17, God opened the skies where I had the opportunity to go to evening classes, which was foreign to me. In order to pay for those evening classes, I'm one of 7. I used to put a pickaxe on my shoulder, put on my tall rubber boots, walk up the street and dig 6-foot ditches in the hot sun. When I couldn't afford to buy books, I took a job painting those white and yellow lines in the middle of the road so that I could get the opportunity to understand something that I didn't have the opportunity to. You have 5 years on me. You should be excellent beyond description. So what I told students this morning is that mediocrity should be like hives on your skin. You shouldn't want to scratch it because it's going to get bad. But you're going to get discouraged. But just think about the art of the possible. No one at that time when I failed that exam thought that I would have been a university president, or much less I would have been back at UE, even not as a student, but as a dean of one, I think, one of the most progressive campuses. That's progressive because of the other 4 campuses. We could not have existed without the folks from all the other 4 campuses who have helped us to get to the point where we are. And we are moving together progressively. So I think UE as a campus in the region and in Latin America is one of the best things that we have from a progressive and innovative point of view. I am optimistic about the future because you are going to make that future for us.
I gotta follow that. Really. So here's the deal. When people talk about the Caribbean, like from the outside, they think about it as fun in the sun. You know, carnival in Trinidad, if they know that, or I'm going to the beach in Barbados. They never talk about it from the perspective of technological advancement. And that is my vision for the region and for Trinidad. How do we transform our image, our brand? Yes, being a place known for fun in the sun is great, but how could we put our mark as also being technologically advanced and leading that, not taking from others and using it, not being only consumers, but being the ones who innovate and invent. And I would say that we talk a lot about the role of governments and the role of policymakers and decision makers and thought provokers. But we each have a responsibility within ourselves to bring our best selves to the spaces that we operate in. And so each of you here, regardless to what barriers are in place, right? If you want to be an entrepreneur and you want to do research, you find the way, break the doors down, and find the way to do that. And that is the responsibility each of us has to making our spaces, our communities, our country, and indeed the world a better place. And I charge you to leave here and think about that. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much to our panelists for sharing so richly this evening with us. Thank you to Dr. Richards Kennedy for being a visionary and for conceptualizing and spearheading this great initiative. And we look forward to seeing what will come out of this in future discussions. And this is a great start to the process of building innovation-based societies in the Caribbean by starting this important conversation. To everyone who attended this evening, I want to say thank you for being here. Thank you for attending. Thank you for your questions. We'll take some more in just a little bit. To the UE team, who's been a tremendous support in pulling this together, we really do appreciate all of your support. To those who are watching online, thank you for tuning in. And we officially bring this series, this discussion, to a close. Thank you. Just wanted a cue to make sure we're off. Hold on. I have my point person up there. Yes, this is the part where, the music is playing.
Is Jonathan. I'm a first year computer science student. I have to admit, before now, I wasn't regularly, actively paying attention to changes in industries and the whole world. Uh, Part of me being here is actually in effort to broaden my own perspective. And I would like to know, well, I do expect to find resources, and as I'm discovering on my own, I expect to find resources and the things I want to tap into. But I'm still discovering what I want to specialize in, even though I know this field is where I belong, and this field is, I think could easily merge with a number of other industries. My question is, are there any specific sources or industries that you would say would be beneficial or paramount to be paying attention to right now?
Where do we start? I mean, I could list 5 right now. I mean, Alex talked about chip manufacturing, definitely.
Big one.
That's huge.
Look at NVIDIA.
Yes. So chip manufacturing, of course, AI, biotechnology, we just came out of COVID. Who developed the vaccines? That was a big one. Robotics is another one. Automation, automatic, self-driving cars, automation, right? And of course, space. I mean, I really leave out space. I mean, so there's so many areas. What are you thinking about? What do you love? What's your passion?
So if I can, real quick, I heard some very wise people this morning talk about a path like this and letting your career go where it takes you. And so get your basics down and learn what you need to learn. But then there'll be an explosion, I think you said this morning, right? A literal explosion, unfortunately. But there'll be something that sparks you, and it'll drive you in a certain direction. And quite honestly, in a few years, it might take you in a different direction. But, as long as you are, my dad used to say, whatever you put in your brain, you put in your pocket, right? And so, in his broken English. But as long as you get your education and you try different things, life's going to nudge you in a certain direction where you should be. Let yourself be nudged and just follow that.
And you're here. That's the first step.
But I think also, don't fall in the trap that what you're studying right now, you have to be there for the rest of your life. That's a trap students fall into. And no one slaps us out of that when we're in college. Because we're there for a purpose, right? And people think, and you graduate and you think, well, if I'm doing computer engineering, I need to do computer engineering my entire life. Most people ask me, well, how come you had a first degree in architecture and you then went on to a PhD in higher education and then data science? And architecture is my foundation because that's where I learned to design. That's where I learned to innovate. And there's nothing more that we need all the innovative minds than in higher education, right? So it all comes together. And if I could give you any advice, is that don't fall into that trap. Because I think most of us came out of that, I would say that blockage, that, if somebody had told me, for example, that coming out of college way back, I would have earned $32,000 US dollars, I would say, man, I should have gone and do something else. But at some point in time, if I had changed my major, I would not be the thought leader I am, right? So it's a way of thinking that helps me. But it didn't lock me into the, well, I used to do that, I have to be an architect for the rest of my life. No, the training at your first degree is a stepping stone for what you want to do. I mean, I happen to think that engineering and anything in the STEM field is a great foundation for whatever you're thinking about whatever problems you're trying to solve. And for the young man who is undecided, just think about what are some of the world's problems. There are two distinctive situations that affect all of us. By 2050, the world has to produce 70% more food to feed its population. By 2050. By 2050, 60% of citizens in the world are going to be living in cities. Those are two huge problems that impact every discipline sitting down here. How are we going to move 60% of the population in cities? How are people going to get around? How are you going to move garbage? How are you going to refine that garbage? How are you going to deal with security? How are you going to deal with transportation? And then the food problem, we know we're not going to produce 70% of the food by 2050. We know that. So the social scientists, how are you going to solve that problem? Are we going to have unrest? Are people going to be basically jacking you up for the food that you're taking from the grocery to your car? How are you going to solve those problems? So those are two huge problems that the world is going to face by 2050. And you have a head start because you're here tonight.
We have about 3 more questions from the audience. I'll ask that we try to move them along quickly so that we can bring tonight to a close. So we have in the red, a young lady in the black, and we have someone, is that gray? Green, okay.
Hi, good night.
Good night.
So I don't necessarily have much of a question, more so some comments. As we talk about innovation, I want to, I'm sorry, I don't know the names of these speakers, but I think it's the dean. You mentioned slavery and that mindset of slavery. I just want to bring that home into how we raise children, and more so within the last 20 to 30 years. Oh, the feedback is terrible. But if it is, even when I was growing up, I'm 31 now, so I was born in the 90s. And a lot of my friends growing up, they did not have the opportunity to rebel against their parents. They'll get slapped, they'll get punished for it. That, to me, we are born innovators. If our parents tell us, don't do something, within our limited reach of knowledge and what we knew at the time, we innovated. We found a way around it to get what we wanted. However, it is that enforcement of punishment, or whatever you want to call it, that has limited our beliefs, limited the way we think. It has suppressed our creativity. And then, we move into primary schools, where at that time, and perhaps it still exists today, it's so strict in terms of a disciplinary perspective. And we have lost what the sense of discipline means, even as a society. Because discipline doesn't mean doing what you're told. It's doing what is right, even when no one is looking. And, this whole system of disciplining a child has suppressed that creativity so much that we move through secondary school, and it's only when we hit university that our lecturers or teachers at that point are quarreling with us. Why don't we question everything? Why aren't we asking questions? We've been suppressed all our lives. up until the age of 18 to maybe 21 at an average age. How do we know? That's a lot to change within a 3-year span. You're looking at a lot of trauma that's been developed within our society, within the population, and even for persons that are older than me, there's a lot of limiting beliefs even in that culture. So that's one, and how do we move past that? That's one of my comments. And I know Dr. Coburn asked what's the need for a university at this point in our society. And some of you mentioned, some of the speakers mentioned, there is a need to fail. There is a need to try and fail. And perhaps our universities need to create that space as not just creating the foundation of knowledge, but also creating the space where students can come to a university, try new things, innovate. Innovate is one thing, but then when we talk about innovation, everybody innovates, but it's based on what they are used to, what they're exposed to. On a global scale, when we talk about innovation, we are looking at innovation based on the latest technology. At university here, we don't have access to the latest technology. So our innovations are far behind the rest of the world. How do we catch up? How do we, and again, and I guess this comes back to funding, but we do need to create a space within our university, and the university needs to adapt and innovate to create that space to allow students like myself and others here, to take chances, to risk something, and to fail. And perhaps trying doesn't necessarily, it doesn't have to reflect badly on your grade. So if your project fails, it doesn't mean an automatic F. There has to be an innovation in the way we teach, in the way we assess what students do, so that it allows us to grow as a part to succeed or fail. That's my comment.
Thank you very much. To the young lady in black. Sorry, no, in the black. And then.
Hello, good night.
Good night.
I'm in my last year in the program Biomedical Technology, and I'm originally from Tobago. So I think the issue that I can bring up is that from seeing through my life, a lot of innovation has started, but it ends up leaving. It doesn't get to develop. It doesn't get to stay. And I personally, I want to be able to stay where my mentors from before, or precursors, people from my parents' generation and so forth who have tried to stay and therefore end up leaving. How is it that we can stay and manage to grow and build up our little country to develop it to that state of innovation that we really aim for? That's my question.
So I would answer that question similar to earlier. I think in technology, I try not to dwell too much on the past, right? And I just try to figure out what is the future. And again, I would say that I have never had the opportunity to have a bank on the stage, whether it was in graduate school at MIT or not. But you have a development bank on the stage who is telling you that they are interested in moving the Caribbean forward from an innovative perspective. I wouldn't leave here without making sure that they have my business card, and I hope you have business cards. Or I wouldn't leave here without they knowing who I am, because that's your source. The closest thing I got to that in college was at Howard. I was going to study one day, and somebody threw a flyer in my hand, Stokely Carmichael and Minister Farrakhan. Stokely Carmichael is Kwame Ture, Stokely Carmichael, and he was banned from Trinidad. And that was the only thing I saw. So So I saw Stokely Carmichael and was happy. But Stokely Carmichael couldn't give any money to my innovation. You have the development bank here. So use that resource, and they are telling you that they're interested in innovation. I just, if anybody leave without talking to our two colleagues, then don't complain.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much to the panelists for a very thought-provoking session, and I also want to thank the students for their questions as well. I feel very much heartened by their contributions this evening. And I will make my question very short because I want to cede some of my time to these two young colleagues over here who have indicated they also have questions. So, as we know, innovation is not just about the creativity and ideas, but getting to the stage of diffusion in the marketplace and widespread adoption. And so we've touched on, I think, two aspects today, in the most part, which would be finance in terms of resource, as well as education. And of course, I think, based on the feedback we're getting from the students, a lot of them are concerned about the ecosystem, right? We can't get to innovation-based economies without innovation ecosystems. And because of the issue of our small island states and the size of our economies, to support you, Dr. Kennedy, we definitely need to take a regional approach to this. So my question to you is, what's CAF's approach in terms of supporting ecosystem development in the region? And then as a university, which also happens to be a regional partner, which is a natural convener for other players, so we're looking at the actors, the resources, as well as the enabling context. What's the envisioned partnership there to support that?
Great question, Lois. Thank you so much. So, I like to use specific examples, and the most recent one was the Sargassum conference in Grenada 2 days ago. And what we did there was that the European Commission had organized on the first day the regional conference. And CAF proposed that the second day we focus on having a Sargassum investment forum, because we wanted to move from ideas into action and from discussions into linkages between the entrepreneurs and the financiers and the policymakers. And so those are the kinds of approaches we use to strengthen the ecosystem. I mean, of course, we're doing work with individual governments on their policy frameworks, regulatory frameworks, and so on, because as a development bank, the main client in most cases would be government or private sector. But at the same time, we can, and we have been, putting grant funding towards ecosystem strengthening across the region, wider Latin America and the Caribbean, and looking at how we expand the opportunities presented by these regional conferences to bring the key actors to the table. And so the regional office for the Caribbean, in particular, what we did was identify some of the key entrepreneurs, Dr. Virginia Henry being one of them, scientists and persons from different spaces who were doing things related to products from Sargassum, bring them and ensure that they were present, because sometimes things are happening. You have events happening, but persons don't have the funding to actually get there and to be at the table. So that's where we can come in, and we have been trying to facilitate participation and then making the connections and ensuring that the right persons speak to each other to build out that ecosystem. We're also working on expanding the number of countries that are members of CAF. And as we do that, we bring, in this year alone, we had 5 countries join, and we are in the process of bringing more on board, because we believe and we are firmly committed to providing increased development financing for the Caribbean as a whole, so that there can be more regional approaches to these particular issues.
I think you have one final question. 2.
Good evening. Thank you all for being here. My name is Matthew Kennedy, and I am a 13-year-old Form 3 student at Fatima College. It brings me pride and joy seeing my mom out here taking her time and spreading information and educating these young minds. So I'd have this one question. Secondary schools are the key to the future of aspiring children. With this in mind, do you believe that the current school curriculum sufficiently supports in educational growth of Caribbean students in the science or technology STEM field? Additionally, do you believe that these schools have the resources to properly prepare a student to learn at the tertiary level? And finally, what do you think that you, as a powerful voice and inspiration to many youths, can do something to foster up more opportunities for Caribbean students to make a difference in our society or to make it big?
So I think, great question. So I think based on the math scores from CSEC, that will have to be no. I mean, there's no way we could say that we're doing a great job and about 30% of the students who sat math basically failed it. And if you look at most of the science subjects, it's not very different. So I would have to say no. And so someone asked earlier, it might have been this morning, and whether one person could change it, because she thought the same thing that I'm saying. And I think one person could change it. I mean, CSEC, how do I put this politically correct? CXC is on the respirator. I mean, and we have to basically look, we have, I think just like how we reimagine a lot of different things, we have to reimagine, is this secondary school system working for us? And is it preparing us? And if it's not preparing us based on constant failures, then we're doing the same thing over and over, and that's insanity. So I think that it's up to us to change it. They're not going to change by themselves because they became a bureaucracy. And when a bureaucracy sustains itself, it doesn't want to change. But you can't continue to fail over and over and then say that you're doing a great job. So the more, and I think it starts with parents, right? I mean, we have a faculty on campus, and I mean, she was livid. She said, CXC didn't, and her daughter went to Canada. She said high school didn't prepare her daughter at all, and she did CAPE. And she struggled her first year. So are we going to continue to tolerate that, or are we going to change it? There has to be a change. I mean, when I heard the score for math, I mean, I was appalled. But
one final and from the
Check. Okay. So I love secondary school students being here. They are, for me, when I think about stakeholders, no offense, current students. When I think about students being our main stakeholder, I think in threes. Current students, yes, but those in secondary and primary schools, those are the ones I have my eyes on. And what we're doing for them is building a bunch of activities to really stoke that passion for science. So we have a math fair every year that we run on the campus. Now it attracts over 2,000 students onto the campus to build a passion for math in answer to what we see in CXC scores. We have involved the country. We have established a presence in the Chemistry Olympiad, which is intended to really fire our competency in chemistry on a world stage. Our first physical entry was a bit chastening because we found out that just like the actual Olympics, where you need to be training all your life, for the Science Olympics, it's the same thing. You don't get ready in a year and knock it out the park. So we are building this as well, all in collaboration with the Ministry of Education. And look out, we have a big one to roll out. I won't spread the news here, but a really big one to go nationwide, to and it's already integrated into the science and math curricula. So to answer your question, the youth is where it's at. The innovators, and my colleagues were angry at me when I said, most innovators are not gray-haired old men, they're you people. They're the young people. So we're trying to invest in those people to build innovators, build them, and not stumble across them every 7 to 12 years. Sorry for taking up your time.
No, it's fine, thank you. I'm gonna stand, I'm really tiny. So, I'm Alex. I'm in my 5th year of St. Joseph's Convent, Port of Spain, and I have CSEC next year. So, I would like to pursue a career in astronomy, namely astrophysics. So, yeah. I am an AFS Global STEM Academies alumnus. I participated in the program this year, and I was one of the international students of the AFS China Academy. When I came back, I shared my experiences with my friends, and a lot of them expressed a keen interest in participating as well, but they were hesitant because of the STEM aspect of the program. In school, I do a combination of humanities and sciences, because I like modern languages and physics. And my friends share classes with me in the former. In my application for AFS, I spoke about the importance of incorporating the arts into STEM because it's one thing to make a groundbreaking scientific discovery or to solve one of the Navier-Stokes equations, but if it doesn't reach the less mathematical people in our society, which is a lot of people, then it sort of takes away from the magnitude of such a discovery, as the general public won't be able to understand why it's such a big deal. Not everyone can just look at a block of text explaining the gas laws, for example, and immediately understand it. And because of this, because they don't understand, they are discouraged from taking up a path in STEM, thinking I'm just not good at it, when in reality it just doesn't appeal to their learning style. So my question is this: what are your thoughts on incorporating the arts in STEM, and how do you think it can be utilized in our education system to encourage more students to do STEM-related subjects?
Excellent. Miss Astrophysicist. By the way, do you know Dr. Alexander Amon? Okay, because she came from St. Joseph, and she was one of my mentees. She saw me speak 10 years ago, and I said, oh my God, I don't know anybody else who wants to do astrophysics, and here's this person who did all this. And so the rest is history. So she's a great mentor for you, by the way. This is your daughter. Yeah, anyhow. So there's a reason, I love to answer this question because there are a couple nuances. There's a reason we had just focused on STEM, because from the perspective of encouraging more women and girls to get into science, technology, and engineering. That's what, those are very male-dominated professions. And we, like the larger we, were struggling with how do we kind of pass these courses or fields out and be intentional about putting systems in place that encourage more women to get into these fields. Because these are the fields where we're trying to solve massive global challenges, and we can't afford to leave 50% of the world's population behind. We actually really need to figure out how we are more inclusive in increasing the amount of women in these fields. And right now, less than 30% of all engineers and scientists worldwide, specifically in the US though, are women. So that's the reason why we focus on STEM. But STEAM, of course, I actually say STEM A or STEM A and D, art and design, because you actually need that. And we talk about solving big space exploration problems. We need everybody. It's not just engineers and scientists. We need, you talk about communicators. Who are the, engineers are not great communicators, which is the reason why we, during COVID, people didn't want to take the vaccine and all this stuff, because we weren't communicating to them why this was really important. So you need good communicators, right, to take that knowledge, take that highly technical information, and speak to the layperson. So you need communicators. You need historians. You need attorneys. We deal with contracts all the time, public-private partnerships. You need people who could write these contracts and negotiate. So you need all of those I look at in the other category, which is the arts and the social sciences and stuff like that. So we absolutely have a messaging problem. We need everybody to be able to solve these really hard global challenges that we face. So it's critical. And you're right, not everybody's gonna be a scientist. Not everybody's gonna be an engineer. We don't need everybody to be scientists and engineers, right? So we need to make sure that we are not marginalizing folks who are artists, you know, and bring that other side of their brain to the table to help solve problems.
Good. We've gone a little bit over our time, almost an hour, but I think the discussion has been great. Thank you for your questions, and thank you very much for coming. I think we can officially close after the official close.